One is revered as a timeless holiday classic promoting love, togetherness, and Macy's department stores. The other is an excessively 90s family movie from the scene layout down to the soundtrack. Miracle on 34th Street. They remade it.
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of They Remade It. I'm your host, Stuart.
And I'm your host, Jacob.
And I would like to preemptively apologize if I ever sound like I'm dealing with some crud in my system. It's because there is crud in my system. The annual changing of the weather guard has come along finally for all of us, and my God, my body does not like it sometimes.
Yeah, it always happens around wintertime. Winter and spring for me, so it's just the longest period of... I mean, I've been congested since I was like 6 years old, but it's always worse during those months, so...
Yeah, I've only gotten worse as I've gotten older. Like, I used to not have allergy problems for a long time, but then once I hit college and everything, it just sucked. Which I think it may have just been because I moved states, and so it's just the environment was different enough. But still, it's just like, ugh. And as I get older, my body's just like, I think it's like specifically my right sinuses, like the right side of my head, it just like does not like me. And so I was just like, oh, cool, my left side feels totally normal. My right side is in pain.
Yeah, no, that's probably the case. I mean, mine is, thankfully, I mean, like I said, I'm still congested consistently, but when I was younger, I used to be way worse. Like, I had actual inhaler-required asthma, which now I barely have asthma at all, which is good. And then allergies, I used to literally be, get hives from going outside from trees and grass. I was literally allergic to all that stuff, but I was on a program for like 2 years of shots and pills, and I'm mostly better now. I still have the allergy stuff and the congestion stuff because my system sucks, but my allergies are nowhere near where they were, so.
Hooray. Take that, nature. You fuck.
Yeah, try to kill me off. This ain't the 18th century, pal. I'm still here. You failed.
Woo! Well, it's killing me. So, before I croak it, why don't you go and give us your rundown of what you've been seeing?
Oh, yes, what I have been seeing and doing and all that jazz. First thing, as far as games have been going, because I've played a couple things here and there, the new God of War did come out, so I've been playing that. I'm about 20 hours into it, and I don't have much to say on it. It's good. I like it. I like the story. I think it's just as quality as the 2018 one, and they managed to vary up combat abilities and play styles just enough to where it still feels like God of War, but it's not just a rehashing like, God of War 2 and 3 felt like just rehashings of the original at times.
Right.
So, like I said, I don't have much to say on that. That's pretty much all I've been doing gaming-wise, but I do like it. I've been having a good time, and I'm sticking with it, so... that's there.
Sick.
Besides that, I've watched a collection of things. I got 3 things here. First one, finally, the year of Ghibli has come to came to a close because I did catch Spirited Away in theaters. Again, not a lot to say on that either. It's just as good as I remember it. There's a reason that most people consider it to be the best of their work. It's a nice adventure story with tight pacing, a good climax, and an ending that actually manages to tie up all the threads that are there. I know that last time when it was either last episode or the episode before, we were talking about Howl's Moving Castle and discussing like the 2 different types of stories that studio put out, and I still stand by sort of what I said there. I think that Spirited Away is the tighter, better version of the adventure story that is in something like Howl's Moving Castle. So
yeah, makes sense.
Yep, no big revelations there. Everyone loves that movie, and for good reason. So,
hey, they did a good job. What do you know?
Yeah, glad I got to see it in theaters for the first time. I was like, this was my first time seeing all of these in theaters, and it was my first time seeing 2 of them. Period. So I'm glad that they did this, and it's a shame it's over. I'm sure I'll do more anniversary stuff at the theaters next year now that I have a theater that actually does participate in those things. Yeah. It just probably won't be themed, so it'll be random snippets here and there. But moving on from that, the other day, the revival movie for Aqua Teen Hunger Force came out.
Oh,
Called
yeah.
Plantasm, which I did watch.
Uh-huh. How was
Uh,
that?
kind of mediocre. It was a little disappointing.
Yeah.
Because I do like Aqua Teen for all of its faults. I still think it holds up for the most part, and it's one of the better shows that Adult Swim put out. And
Yeah.
I know that a lot of people really did not like that first movie because it was like an hour and 20-minute version of a regular episode where the pacing is horrible and it feels like nothing's happening and it barely has a plot. But that's kind of the reason I like it. I think that
Yeah, I feel like that was kind of the point.
yeah, I feel like Aqua Teen's style of humor works best if it's just a loose thread of things that are barely, something is going on, but the main characters barely participate in it, and they don't really care. Unfortunately, Plantasm takes more of a plot-focused approach, where there's a really clear through line throughout the whole thing that the characters are actively involved in, and the dialogue still works for the main four characters. It's still funny here and there, and the interactions can be gold because it just feels like the characters have come back from the show, but the story doesn't really work for their style of comedy. Them being proactive and constantly doing things works in the opening to the movie because it's like it's a story that's being told by Master Shake, who is a perpetual liar who's really egotistical.
Yeah.
So that works. But then once the actual plot kicks off, it's like this feels like a completely different thing to me. So, was a little disappointed by that.
That feels like the consistent through line whenever I see like old shows, like especially Adult Swim kind of level shows, get brought back in some capacity. Like that kind of happened with Samurai Jack with me, where it really didn't feel like there was ever a necessity to wrap up the story for Samurai Jack. Like I thought like the whole point of it of just like him going on these odysseys was kind of the story in and of itself. But then when you kind of bring up the concept of it ending, of it actually getting wrapped up, you realize, yeah, this doesn't really all make a lot of sense. And so it just kind of peters out a little, like peters out a bit. And just the way they handle it in general, which is kind of lame in the end. And not a little bit creepy in certain contexts. So yeah, anytime I see a thing of like, oh, we're bringing it back for X thing or whatever, like I see they're bringing back Futurama again, which like that almost feels appropriate just because they've been canceled so many times. But I thought they kind of wrapped up, right? Like
they've had 3 different finales at this point. The original run, they had The Devil's Hands or Idle Playthings. For the movies, Into the Wild Green Yonder was their second finale. And then, Meanwhile, which is the one where time freezes and Fry and Leela, like, sort of live their life together, was the third finale. So now, they're going to have to pester Ken Keeler to write a 4th finale for when the Hulu run inevitably ends.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. I've still been watching through those episodes, and they're still funny and everything, so, like, I'm optimistic, I guess, to see where it'll go, but cautiously. I'm just like, at a certain point, I just gotta go, can't we just make new shit? Like, like, we can make new shit. It's fine.
Don't tell people to make new things. Then we won't have anything to talk about on our show.
I mean, yeah, obviously. But I mean, in like the TV space, like we don't touch TV shows.
Yeah. I get that.
If we did, we'd be doing this for decades.
We would never be done. Oh, now we're talking Dynasty. Everyone loves Dynasty.
If I had to pass this down to my theoretical non-existent child, I would fully understand if he murdered me in my sleep one day. Or they murder me in my sleep, whatever.
Whoever they are, they can kill me just fine.
Yeah, that's why I'm not having kids.
So that's Plantasm.
Sorry.
No, I like it when that happens. I mean, really, the last thought I have on that, because I was pretty disappointed. Like I said, the humor and the writing are still there. They just have to do it right. They released a bunch of YouTube shorts earlier in the year for Aqua Teen, and each short was based around a different villain that they had, and those shorts are great, with the exception of, like, one of them, which I'm not a big fan of. But it proves that the writing, like, it's still there. This movie just didn't work. So.
Yeah, fair. I'm surprised they didn't just do more episodes.
I mean, that's what I would have done, but they're in this weird thing with HBO Max doing a lot of these things. I mean, that's what they're doing with Metalocalypse. They have a movie coming out, if that hasn't been canceled yet, and they're wrapping up Venture Brothers with a new movie, if that hasn't been canceled yet. It's all this weird HBO, Warner, Discovery horseshit that they're going through. So.
That is a can of worms we do not even know how to begin with.
No. At least it got made. We'll see if the other 2 still get made. Those other 2 specials. But anyways, yes, I have one more thing to talk about. I actually wasn't going to talk about this, but our recording got pushed back a little bit, so I saw this last night in the theater, and that is The Menu.
Ooh, yeah, I've actually been really interested in that one.
I was a big fan of the trailers, which I had seen like 6 times because I've been going to the theater so much. I saw the trailer 6 times before finally seeing the movie. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, I really do want to see that. I like Rafe Fiennes, and it looks, it looks horror adjacent, which is right up my alley. So I watched it, and I was a big fan. I really liked it.
Sick. I gotta see. I gotta go see it.
It's just horror enough to keep my interest in that field, but it's actually, it's a horror comedy, it's a dark comedy, and the comedy actually works. I'm so sick of like new comedy movies because none of them work. They all rely on the same style of humor, like, the joke delivery, but this movie's actually funny. And
Yeah.
it does a great job setting it up, and Rafe Fiennes has some of the funniest dialogue in this movie, but he's this really straight and sometimes sinister chef, and it makes it even funnier because it's a comedic line reading, but you can tell he really means everything that he's saying.
He is a pretty brilliant actor when it comes to that style. Like he has an ability that is kind of unmatched in that straight man able to be in any kind of role, even if it's not a straight man role.
Yeah, it's great. And obviously, I'm not gonna like spoil the movie or where it goes because I'm not like, I mean, not just because the movie just came out, but like I'm not about that. But
Right.
my favorite part about the movie is that there's not really a lot of these, especially horror adjacent movies. I know that Don't Worry, Darling, that just came out, kind of was infamous with this due to the changed script or screenplay, but they try to rely on like an Act 3 twist that changes everything and makes you finally understand the story. I love that the menu does not attempt to do that. Pretty early on, they're like, no, this is what's happening, this is what we're committing to it, and whether they like it or not, all the characters just have to accept it. And that makes the movie
Sick.
even funnier because the movie knows what it is, it knows what it's doing, and it tells you outright. It's like, okay, now just enjoy the ride.
Sick. And from what I can tell, it pokes fun at foodies, and I love that more than anything.
There are 2 characters specifically that remind me so much of film students that I met in college, and
Oh,
I
man.
hate them, but I also love them at the same time because the performance is so well done.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, no, I definitely got to see it because, as we said before, we went to the same film class. So,
Yes. I can't wait
oh
for you to
god.
see this and tell me your thoughts. Maybe we, without spoiling,
And
or
I'm also
we can
like,
talk about it a little more in depth. But
and I also have the other side of, I'll never call myself a foodie because that shit's stupid. Anytime that the phrase mouthfeel gets brought up to me, I want to strangle someone. But I've been interested enough in food and dining for a long time that I at least know about this sort of shit. Like I know like Michelin star style restaurants like this actually exist, and I'm very interested to see like to what degree they take it. I'm excited for that.
all right, well, I am excited for you. Even if you don't like it, I would like to talk about this more.
I mean, I'm sure I'll like it.
So
Even if I don't love it, I'm sure I'll enjoy it.
that's good. That's good. But yeah, that's all I've seen. How about we hop over to you?
Sick. I've been playing a lot of stuff lately. I've watched one movie, which I'll leave to the end of my stuff. As far as games, haven't really been able to stick to one thing solidly. A lot of my time has been taken up with the game Chivalry 2. I can't remember if I brought that up before or not. But yeah, just same deal. I'm getting more into it, but at times it's just kind of frustrating and a little boring at times. Not a ton of map variety when it gets right down to it, but they're also complex, like team objective things, so it's still enjoyable enough. Um, Otherwise, I've been playing a bit more on my computer again, just because I'd kind of left it to the wayside. Been trying to play through more of this one, Planet Crafters, I think it is. Very, very janky and still in very alpha, like pre-release mode, but such a good gameplay loop of just keeping it going. And like, I mean, the ratings on Steam alone are enough to tell you that. Um, plus I just like that whole shit of like, oh, what if I actually made things nicer? Um, and so that's taking a bit more time. But the main thing that's now been taking up my time and that I've been putting off for a long time, but I'm glad I finally picked it up. Disco Elysium.
Yo.
Yeah, I finally decided to pick it up. It was on sale for pretty low, and it recently came out with like the final cut or something, which like it's really sad. Apparently, the collective that put it together actually got broken up and went under, and so now there's going to be a sequel of it, but it's done by completely different people, and so I probably will not play it. From everything I've even tangentially heard about the game, it seems it's very much a labor of not necessarily love, but of like very distinct and real like world frustrations and reactions to the world as we're in, and like just the amount of time I played so far, which I think is something like maybe 5 hours in or so, which is to say I barely left the first area. um, um, it is dense and weird, and I did not expect any of what I'm getting, but I am adoring it so far. It is so good. Um, it's it is impossible really to describe it without having someone else having played it. So I highly recommend, if you're not into more not necessarily cerebral, but very like thinking kind of games, like most of this is just talking to folks, and a lot of times they will just go on long diatribes of random bullshit. Like this one dude I was just talking with, which just gave me a pretty in-depth like stance on his racial theories. And so I was just like, I'm just here trying to solve a murder. um, but it's so itself that it's hard to describe it other than, yeah, it's a good game. You should play it. It's a point and click adventure. It's a mystery. It's a like rambling tirade against societies and like all the different things of the modern world. And it's just kind of silly. It's at the end of the day also just very silly. And it is absolutely worth your time if you have the chance to play it. I'm guessing you've played it.
Yeah. I'm wondering
Gotcha.
how you're playing your character.
There's a few art, like for context, for folks listening. You start off with a few different archetypes you can choose from. I went with the encyclopedic one, like just the pure intelligence, because I figured, okay, if I know vaguely about the premise of this game is that you're trying to solve a murder, and so I just went with that. I think so far that's been probably the best one to start off for a first playthrough, just because like I like learning about the world, and this guy explicitly means you get a bunch of like encyclopedic facts about the world, and so I'm like, okay, cool, that works for me, and that helps me process things faster. Um, but it's also that feeling of, okay, I'm basically just this, not quite. If Sherlock Holmes was even 1,000 times more unhinged, that's basically what I am with my social skills in the game. So it's like, it's clear that I'm missing items, but I don't mind it so much. It means I want to come back and play through again. But it's just I just adore it so far, because I'm adoring it even just for the fact of trying to solve a mystery as a character with amnesia. It's if that alone was the premise of the game, I'd adore it. But it's the fact that there's also all this other shit going on and all these insanely in-depth characters means I'm probably going to come back to play this a couple of times at least. It's so strange, and it's a constant feeling of, I don't know if I'm doing this right, and I think that's entirely the point, and it's kind of brilliant in doing that.
Yeah, I like that it's able to sort of place itself in a way that you can actually revisit it and get multiple playthroughs out of it. It has replayability, which a lot of point and clicks, even with multiple dialogue trees or whatever, a lot of point and clicks can't really achieve that.
Mm. I think it's just because it's held up so well by its writing. Like, its writing is phenomenal, and also its voice acting. Just like, you have multiple idiosyncratic facets of your own brain chatting with you, and it's just this absurd kind of tableau of just everything that just means I want to listen to every ounce of words they have to give me. It's a damn good time. And again, I've played I played a fair amount of hours in, and I have barely scratched the surface so far. So I am excited.
That's nice.
But to kind of find the flip side of me gushing about this incredible tableau of cerebral writing and laments about modern society, I watched the Weird Al movie.
The one with Daniel Radcliffe.
With Daniel Radcliffe, yeah. It was it was free through Roku, which was nice. I loved it. I thought it was hilarious. I thought it very much just was like, it has absolutely no shame going through it and doing what they're trying to do. Obviously the entire point is that the entire thing is just a ludicrous parody of basically every film and TV trope you can think of. I think the director himself came out in an interview and said, "I assure everyone, I have done exactly zero research into Weird Al's actual life before making this movie." I was like, perfect, perfect, perfect. And so I thought it was fantastic. Obviously, it's not meant to be taken seriously. I think Daniel Radcliffe was phenomenal in the role. It was actually really fun because all moments when he's singing, it's straight up just dubbed in Weird Al singing the song. But Daniel Radcliffe is so good at the lip sync that it's hard to tell at times. It's like, man, his voice really doesn't match, but his mouth is moving perfectly to this. My goodness. And so they put a lot of effort into it. Obviously, Weird Al himself is in the movie as a pretty minor role. It's hard really to say other than just at one point he starts fighting the Mexican drug cartel or the South American drug cartel, which kind of comes out of nowhere, and I'm like, okay, cool. That's a minor spoiler. I don't even know how to call that a spoiler because it's so unexpected that it's impossible to predict when that's going to happen. So yeah, I thought it was great. I think I see a lot of people shitting on it, being like, "Oh, it's such a non sequitur on all these things." It's like, man, y'all really got to learn to have fun. I'm
haven't
happy
seen UHF.
Exactly, yeah. And so it's just, yeah, I adore it. I think it's a direction of movies that I haven't seen in a long time. That is to say, we made a movie because we thought it would be fun, and that's it. Like, there's no other grand scheme here. I adore it so much. And stay through the credits, because there's even a unique song by Weird Al for the credits. It's pretty fantastic.
Wow. I mean, that's certainly on my watch list, and it's something that I want to see as a big fan of Weird Al. But when I saw it was going to be like Apple TV Plus or Roku or whatever, I was like, what the fuck? How am I going to watch that? I'll find it later. And then I saw Weird Al on his Twitter account being like, don't pirate this. Don't go to this site to pirate it. Certainly don't go over here and pirate it. I was like, I love you.
Yeah, he is a gem. I'm glad that of all the people who have been in the public eye for as long as they have been, he's just been there, just doing his thing. He kicks ass.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what he'll do next. I think he's the only recording artist that has had a hit top 100 album in every decade since he started making music. And now that we're in this new the 2020s, I wonder, will he do something?
I mean, I imagine this movie is, I can't imagine it's his swan song. I imagine this just kind of picked up popularity for him more than ever. So I'm sure he's gonna get something.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, he hasn't faded away. I'm wondering if he's gonna like do another album. I wonder when because everyone inevitably stops. I wonder when he just did his self-indulgent vanity tour, where he just played, he did a bunch of performances, but he didn't play any of his parody music. It was all the stuff that he originally wrote. So I mean, he's still going around doing stuff.
Sick. Yeah, I'm excited for him. I think he deserves the success. And this movie only kind of further cemented, oh yeah, no, he's still hilarious and all his shit's still good, so fuck it.
Yep, he's still great.
But yeah, that's my lot. I don't think I've seen anything else really of major significance. I still need to get back to the theater more, but just, I'll be honest, I haven't really found a lot of stuff I've been super excited to see other than the menu now, which I don't know if I can see with Hannah. I'll have to find the time to see it myself.
No, that's all right. I mean, I've just been going more so out of habit at this point because I like the experience, and I've been seeing, if people haven't been aware, based on previous podcasts, been doing the Ghibli thing, and also G-Kids re-releasing anime, like new anime releases, but here in the States, like Pompeo the Cinephile and Goodbye Donglease and things like that. But yeah, not a lot I've really been interested in as far as American releases until the menu, which I was like, I gotta see that. And there's a good chance that it's going to be just fluff garbage. But that Violent Night movie that's coming out with David Harbour as Santa Claus, I do kind of want to see in the theater. So
oh yeah,
I'll be seeing that as well.
Gotcha. That sounds fun.
Speaking of Santa.
Oh yeah,
I guess.
Speaking of that guy,
we're doing Miracle on 34th Street.
Christmas time.
So first up, we'll be talking about Miracle on 34th Street from 1947, directed by George Seaton. Kris Kringle, played by Edmund Gwenn, is indignant to find that the man assigned to play Santa in the annual Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade is intoxicated. When he complains to event director Doris Walker, played by Maureen O'Hara, she persuades Kris to take his place. He does so well that he is hired to play Santa at Macy's New York City store on 34th Street. Ignoring instructions from the toy department head, Mr. Shellhammer, played by Philip Tong, to recommend overstocked items to undecided shoppers, Kris directs one woman to another store to fulfill her son's Christmas request. Impressed by Kris's honesty and helpfulness, she informs Shellhammer that she will now become a loyal Macy's customer. Attorney Fred Gailey, Doris's neighbor, played by John Payne, takes the young divorcee's daughter, Susan, to see Santa. Susan here is played by Natalie Wood. Doris has raised her daughter not to believe in fairy tales, but Susan is shaken after seeing Kris speak Dutch with a girl who does not know English. Doris asks Kringle to tell Susan that he is not Santa, but he insists that he is. Worried, Doris decides to fire him, but Kris has generated so much positive publicity and goodwill that the store's owner promises bonuses. To alleviate Doris's misgivings, Granville Sawyer, played by Porter Hall, is asked to administer a psychological evaluation and recommends Kris's dismissal. Meanwhile, Susan shows Kris a magazine photo of her dream house and tells him she wants it for Christmas. Reluctantly, he promises to do his best. In the company cafeteria, young employee Alfred, played by Alvin Greenman, tells Kris that Sawyer convinced him that he is unstable simply because he is kind-hearted. Kris immediately goes to confront Sawyer, eventually striking him on the head with an umbrella. Sawyer exaggerates his pain to have Kris confined to Bellevue Hospital. Tricked into cooperating and believing Doris to be in on the deception, Kris deliberately fails his examination and is recommended for permanent commitment. However, Fred persuades Kris not to give up. At a hearing before Judge Henry X. Harper, played by Gene Lockhart, District Attorney Thomas Mara, played by Jerome Cohen, gets Chris to assert that he is Santa Claus and rests his case, asking Harper to rule that Santa does not exist. In private, Harper's political advisor, Charlie Halloran, played by William Frawley, warns him that doing so would be disastrous for his upcoming re-election bid. Harper buys time by hearing further evidence. Fred here calls Mr. Macy, played by Harry Antrim, as a witness and persuades him to admit that he does believe in Santa. On leaving the stand, Macy fires Sawyer. Next, Fred calls Mara's own young son, who testifies that his father told him that Santa was real. Mara must concede the point, but goes on to demand that Fred prove that Chris is the one and only Santa Claus on the basis of some competent authority by the following day. Meanwhile, Susan writes Chris a letter to cheer him up, which Doris also signs. When a New York post office mail sorter sees Susan's letter, which is addressed to Chris at the New York courthouse, he suggests delivering all of the dead letters addressed to Santa Claus to Chris. As court resumes, Fred is told of the delivery of mailbags to the courthouse. He argues that the post office, a branch of the U.S. federal government, has acknowledged that Chris is the one and only Santa Claus by delivering the letters. When the judge insists on seeing them, Fred has them dump bag after bag on Harper's desk. Judge Harper then dismisses the case. On Christmas morning, Susan loses faith in Chris when he admits he was not able to get her the house that she wanted. However, after Chris offers Fred and Doris a route home that avoids traffic, Susan sees her dream house with a for sale sign in front. Demanding that Fred stop the car, she joyfully runs into the house exclaiming Mr. Kringle is Santa Claus. Fred learns that Doris had encouraged Susan to have faith and suggests they purchase the house. He then boasts that he must be a great lawyer since he proved an eccentric old man was Santa. However, when he and Doris spot a cane in the house next to the fireplace that looks just like Chris's, he is not so sure. Alright, and now for Miracle on 34th Street from 1994, directed by Les Mayfield. For the purposes of this, the story is almost identical. So I'm going to go through the cast list real quick, and then I'll outline a couple of key differences before we get started talking in earnest. So, Mara Wilson plays Susan Walker, Elizabeth Perkins plays Dory Walker, Richard Attenborough plays Chris Kringle, James Remar plays Jack Duff, Jack McGee plays Tony Falaci, which is the original Santa that was fired at the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, Simon Jones plays Donald Shellhammer, J.T. Walsh plays Ed Collins, Dylan McDermott plays Brian Bedford, Robert Prosky plays Judge Henry Harper, and Jane Leaves plays Alberta Leonard. This film is almost entirely the same as the new one, as I said before, but with a few key differences. The first of which being that the film isn't using Macy's as sort of a prop, but instead using fictional Kohl's and Shoppers Express in place of Macy's and Gimbel's. Gimbel's went out of business in 1987, hence its lack of involvement in the film. However, Macy's, the store, was asked to be involved in the 1994 Miracle on 34th Street, but the store declined as they didn't feel the original could be improved on in any way.
That's big of them, and a rare sight in our world.
Oh, yes. Well, I've seen some speculating online that it was because they were waiting until their bankruptcy cleared the next year before being in the spotlight, but I found no official verification of that, just speculation, so maybe big of them. The next big change is that there is no in-house psychiatrist as an antagonist that is the reason Chris gets to go through his legal woes. Instead, he's arrested for assaulting the previous Kohl's Santa that was fired at the parade, who is in league with the villainous Shoppers Express. And finally, the case is resolved not through Santa's letters coming in through the post office, but instead through the judge realizing that the government places its faith in God, through In God We Trust, on official money. So since there's no hard evidence of that being true, and it's purely based on faith, therefore New York can do the same as Santa. So the outcome is the same, but the path to get there is slightly different. But that's it for Miracle on 34th Street.
Fantastic. Now I understand that this is an older movie, and, well, you know...
Let's do it. And by that, I mean Full Circle, which we will go through here as briefly as possible. I mean, most of these names we won't have to talk about because we don't know who the fuck they are, but we'll see. So first, we have Arthur Tovey, who was a patient in 47's Miracle on 34th Street. We also saw him as an elderly man receiving an alumni line or something. In 96 as the Nutty Professor with Eddie Murphy. He was also a member of the Angry Mob in 74 as Young Frankenstein. Rick Sullivan played a guard in 47's Miracle, and he was a police officer, or the police officer, in 46's The Postman Always Rings Twice. Gene Lockhart, a slightly bigger name, played Judge Henry Harper in 47's Miracle. He also played Squire Slossom in 1941's All That Money Can Buy, also known as The Devil and Daniel Webster. Jack Albertson was the postal sorter in 47's Miracle, and he was Grandpa Joe in 1971's Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. So that is our first, I think, big, oh hey, I recognize who that is.
Hey, you lazy fuck, I'm glad you got a job.
Yeah, that was before he was bedridden and had to sleep with 3 other elderly. James Say played Dr. Pierce in 47's Miracle. He was a government man in 51's The Day the Earth Stood Still, and he is the police officer in 62's Whatever Happened to Baby Jane.
Cool. Were there a few?
Yeah, I think there were like two or three at the beach. I mean, before, everyone starts swarming Betty Davis and Joan Crawford on the beach, but yeah, there were a couple. I guess none of them had names, though, so he was one of the officers. We'll say that. Jeff Corey was a reporter in 47's Miracle. He played Tom Chaney in 69's True Grit and Tom Sharp in 41's All That Money Can Buy. Again, Devil and Daniel Webster. So some big roles. He was just a reporter in 47's Miracle on 34th Street, but, leading roles in both True Grit and All That Money Can Buy. So this is a big one. Jeffrey Sayre was a courtroom reporter in 47's Miracle. He was a courtroom spectator in 69's True Grit. He was a customer at Drucker's in 1960's Ocean's 11. And he was a reporter in 1946's The Postman Always Rings Twice.
Jesus.
So we've seen him all over the place, apparently. But in all these small roles, so I couldn't tell you who he is. And finally, for 47's Miracle on 34th Street, Robert Carnes, who was one of the Bellevue interns in Miracle, and he played Bellhop Joe in 1947's Nightmare Alley. All right, just a couple left for 1994's Miracle. We have Elizabeth Perkins, who was the lead, Dory Walker in Miracle. She played Phyllis Adler in 2016's Ghostbusters, Answer the Call. Jack McGee was Tony Falacci in 94's Miracle. Again, that's the drunken Santa from the beginning. He was also the police photographer in Tron Legacy from 2010.
Huh.
James Remar played Jack Duff in 94's Miracle. He was the Block Warlord in 1995's Judge Dredd with Sylvester Stallone. And finally, Rosanna Scotto played a news anchor in both 1994's Miracle on 34th Street and 2016's Ghostbusters Answer the Call. So that's two little 94 Miracle connections with Ghostbusters, interestingly enough. Yep, but that is it for Full Circle.
Well, fantastic. That's a hell of a job you've done. I was about to be like, well, at least you only had to do the one synopsis, but then, the fucking Full Circle came in with a chair.
All hell broke loose.
Yeah, I'll let you take a rest at that point. I just like, I think my only my initial thought here is, having been reminded of the Devil and Daniel Webster, it is odd that this is like the second movie we've done where the climax of the film is determined through legal action, and I really wasn't expecting that on this one. Like, I've seen a lot of like kind of courtroom drama things, like A Few Good Men, My Cousin Vinny, which opposite ends of the spectrum, I understand, but still. Yeah. But it's. And I tend to enjoy them. I really don't know how I necessarily feel about the climax of this family Christmas movie, though, being as steeped in legal trouble as it ends up being. Like, I fully did not expect. I thought there was going to be like some level of thing like, oh, there's going to be an issue with like him recommending people to other stores. There's going to be some sort of like drama with like the, people at Macy's kind of coming after him. Maybe the guy that he kind of shunted to the side before, like the drunk, is going to come around as like some, kind of bruiser type, which it sort of does in the, in the 94 version. But the fact that it ultimately came down to, can we as a jury legally decide that this man is the mythical being known as Santa Claus? And the fact that it turned out to be successful in the first case because of the God-blessed post office, which is honestly the most believable version of this. Yes. And in the other is determined by the implications of acknowledging the existence of a god in the terms of legal doctrine. And like, I feel like that just opens up a can of worms. Like, the universe that this movie has created in this way is potentially the most detrimental development in U.S. history. That alone is enough to constitute existence and legal boundaries. Yeah. And it's just, it consumed my brain for the remainder of the movie. Like, the first one was fine. It's like, okay, yeah, the post office can determine shit because, god damn it, the post office is like the sleeper juggernaut of this country. Like, y'all know that the post office has their own fucking, like, essentially SWAT team, like essentially like an armed part of them. Like, they're the ones that brought in Madoff, like Bernie Madoff. Like, it's just, like just kind of casually coming in here as like these badasses. It's like, okay, yeah, they could determine if Santa Claus can be considered a sovereign citizen. But just the fact of like, I don't know, I'm rambling ultimately about this. That is the thing that has consumed my thoughts, especially from the 94 one, the entire time after having seen it. The combination of, that's how this movie ends, and that's the implication we're going with?
The 90, Yeah, the 94 one makes a bit of a mess with this, and it's funny because they keep trying to get around it even as they're making the decision. Like
Yeah.
the judge is like constantly saying, "Now, we aren't here to decide whether God is real. That is not my job. Don't worry, that's not what I'm saying. This is purely about faith." I mean, like,
Yeah,
yeah, I guess, but
but
this
like
is
you're doing
still a
it in a
dangerous
court of
precedent.
law.
Yes.
Like you're a judge and you're actively using this as like legal doctrine now. Like the "in God we trust" thing has a, I think there's some level of legal doctrine stated previously that like it's not meant to be stated as a legal statement, like "in God we trust" on US currency. It's just like it's meant to just be like, it's like a pluribus unum, like from like many there is one or whatever the fuck. Like it's meant to just be like a one of the cornerstones of the country's foundation. um it's meant to say like we believe in something greater than ourselves. And I know even that could sort of be construed, but again, that just opens up so many weird implications that I just gotta wonder, why didn't they just stick to the post office thing originally? I thought that was honestly kind of brilliant, because it's like, oh yeah, of course there's gonna be thousands, if not millions, of dead letters in New York alone of kids writing their letters to Santa Claus. Like that makes sense. Um, and the fact that they were able to convince them to do this basically created this legal loophole of, oh, he is, if he's acknowledged by a governmental institution as this individual, then it counts. It's that's that's brilliant. That's funny. It's interesting and really just avoids all the can of worms that have been opened up with 94.
And I don't really understand why it was changed in the 94
Yeah.
version. I don't really understand. If it was a bit more recent, like mid 2000s or whatever, I can kind of see it being changed because, like, well, how often do we use the post office or actually send letters anymore? I don't know if kids still send letters to Santa. You know, I don't know if that's a thing. So maybe that would make sense. But this is from the early 90s. Like, we're still using mail. We're still sending things by post really frequently.
Yeah. Like it's, and I know ultimately this is kind of minor in the grand scheme of things, but also like just the fact of it is just the such a narrative and cognitive dissonance between the tone of the rest of the film in both cases of like, we go from, oh, Santa Claus has decided to, actually be a part of, the modern world to kind of like, combat the dangers that is capitalism. Um, which, like, when I put it that way, it makes it seem more serious. But imagine that in a more jovial sense. Um, but then it just shifts into, oh no, we have to legally decide that this man is in fact Santa Claus, and the implications that goes with that. It's just like, it feels like everything else just kind of falls to the wayside as a result. It's like, I gotta ask for both of these movies, what was the message in the end? Like, I'm sure there was one, but it's kind of been lost on me, at least.
Well, the 47 one, I think, is a bit clear. They both try to do the same message, but I think the 47 one is clear with it because of how it resolves. But it's about having faith, just in things in
Yeah.
general, whether it makes sense to you or not, and that comes through, I think, most clearly with Doris or Dory or whatever, because people got to change things just slightly all the time in these remakes.
Why the fuck not?
Yeah, but the main female lead sort of coming to the realization that it's fine for a kid to believe in things and also for her to have faith in things and not be completely shut out, which is also sort of mirrored in her relationship with the attorney, who is Fred Gailey in one movie and Brian Bedford in the other movie. But
Poor man's Patrick Warburton.
yeah, the 94 one like really sort of loses that thread. It doesn't seem like it doesn't seem like Dory or Doris or whatever, Susan's mom, it doesn't feel like she has much of an arc in the 94 version, because a key moment in the 47 version is Susan is writing a letter to Chris while he's on trial saying, "I believe in you," and then Doris signs at the bottom, "I also believe in you," in her nice adult, penmanship. And then Chris gets to read that and he's like, "I had an effect on them, that's the belief, that's the faith that I think Christmas is all about, is loving one another and trusting each other." He's trying to fix these people more or less for what he sees, whether he's right or wrong in that is up for debate, but that's sort of his goal. 94, I don't remember Dory ever having that moment.
I think it's kind of come down to like how they've decided to come about it. Because for all the like the shitting on the 47 one I seem to have been doing so far, I do think its storycraft is actually very good. I think it's done a very good job of bringing across those things. Like, because I do get that message now of, okay, it's meant to be about faith. Like, yeah, that makes sense. And I think it did that very subtly and very kind of like, just not necessarily even subtly, just it did it without trying to make a bigger thing about it. Like, ultimately, the legal proceeding was kind of more just like a hurdle that allowed other conclusions to be made. Like that moment of saying, "I also believe in you." The trial ended up helping her come to that conclusion. And as a result, the trial was only concluded by something that was more circumstantial than anything else. So it's like, oh, we can send, if we send these letters to him, and that was that. Whereas the other one, whereas 94, the trial's conclusion is the message, where it's saying, oh, we have to have faith in these things. If we can have faith of these on a governmental level, we can have them on a personal level. And I think it just kind of loses it that way. Like when someone kind of all of a sudden stands on high and says, this is what it's about. And I know, obviously there's different storycraft where you can do that well. I mean, Greek plays and Greek stories are basically that to a T. But the fact that it felt like it had to do it that way kind of makes it lose any of the real impact, where it's like, oh, that's the message. And it's just, it never feels right when it's coming from a legal judge,
Right.
it feels like it's like, okay, so this magic of Christmas has been officially defended in a court of law. That, I feel like that just undercut the entire concept of the magic of Christmas. Where it's like the original one, it's like, yeah, the magic of Christmas is, and the magic of like this idea of faith persists despite these, more cold calculating structures. Like that's not the point. It's like, the fact that he's this Santa and he's giving people recommendations to go to other stores because he recognizes it's not about the stores or the gifts themselves. It's about the joy in making these things happen. And it just doesn't really come across in the 94 one. It just feels very stale by comparison. I think, I won't lie, I think it also has to do with the fact that the two different Santas on display are a bit, well, no hate to Richard Attenborough, but the man is creepy in this movie, right?
A bit, yeah.
Like when he first is in the parade and doing like the on dasher, on dancer and all that sort of stuff, it looks like he's laughing like a maniac up there. And like his eyes are wide and his teeth are just kind of like, like that, which like no shame on people that like their teeth look different like that. But trying to bring across the idea of jovial just came off as insane to me. And I was like, this is uncomfortable.
Yeah. I'm kind of primarily with the teeth thing. I like, again, I understand it. No shaming to like teeth or whatever, especially for an old man that, I don't know Richard Attenborough's life, but he probably drank, he probably smoked, and he's from a different time. But I feel like for a movie that presents so many close-ups of his face as sort of this fictional character that I feel like they would give him like false teeth or something. And the fact that they didn't was kind of surprising. It's hard not to notice, I'll say.
Yeah, and I know ultimately, like, I know ultimately that's not necessarily the biggest thing. Like, I know people can be, happy and jovial and everything, and their teeth may not necessarily be the best. Like, I've had uncles, but at the same time, it's just like also just his general presentation of the whole character, where it's like he's a very animated man. He always has been in all of his roles. He like maybe not necessarily through like movements or everything, but he's never seemed like a small character. I mean, like between this, like his role in Jurassic Park, obviously that's the most notable one, or like the most famous one. He doesn't bring off the kind of like composure that you'd expect from a Santa Claus figure. And I think Edmund Gwenn does it beautifully throughout his, because I think he brings off the presentation pretty perfectly in a lot of ways. Like he doesn't have this idea of like, just, oh, he's just this big fat man who laughs and is all these things. He seems elegant. He seems refined and decent. And like, he seems like he knows what he's talking about. He doesn't just kind of seem a bit wired as Attenborough seems. Like his beard isn't like this wild looking thing or this short, or like this kind of shorter version that Attenborough has. It's a very well kept and well styled beard. He bears himself with a lot of authority. It brings up what like this character would actually seem like, rather than just like kind of, if your uncle was just really fun, which a lot of portrayals tend to do, which I've never really been huge on. So I think that brings it off incredibly well, and I think that carries most of the film when it comes right down to it. Like even when it kind of drags with some of the legal proceeding bits and like the bits where they kind of have to talk about, like, oh, this whole thing's about making money, all these different things. But the fact that it is him standing staunchly against it, but in a kind and hopeful way, it's like, yeah, no, I want to root for this character. It's difficult not to.
Yeah. And so we're in a particular place in time currently in regards to mental health and things like, words like crazy and insane. Like I get it. But if we're talking about these specific movies, which, whether you believe this is really Santa is obviously up for debate, and the movies make that abundantly clear that they're not going to take an official stance on that, whether they, have little nods to it or whatever. But this character is an elderly man who some can describe as crazy or insane, quote unquote, due to what he believes, even if... And the primary debate is he a harm to himself or others? I guess.
Yeah.
Just because he believes himself to be Santa. And the way Richard Attenborough plays it makes it feel like this man could be dangerous.
Yeah. I think that, which like, yeah, I think about that more and more. It's like, yeah, that honestly kind of plays into the concept a bit better. Because I think in the original one, we're not meant to believe, like, because like in both cases, we start with the Kris Kringle character on screen. and it's meant to like have us as the audience lean towards the belief that yeah, he's actually the guy. But in the 47 one, it doesn't really even make it seem like there's any doubt to it for the most part. So it seems weird. Obviously, as film goers, we're the ones meant to be like, okay, yeah, this is a movie. We're supposed to have that suspension of disbelief here. But like the other moments throughout the film where people are kind of debating against it, it just kind of feels grating at times. But it does feel more believable, at least with 94, where it's like, yeah, this might just be some guy. Like that, which kind of opens up a bit more nuance to the situation. But it's a nuance it doesn't really take advantage of, it feels like.
But yeah, to that end, the resolution feels stranger, though, in the 94 one, going off of that, because in the 47 one, the sort of nod to the audience of, oh, this old man might be Santa, is they go into this house that Susan's like, oh, this is the house that I wanted. He really is Santa Claus. And, the parents are laughing, and then they see the cane next to the fireplace. And it's like, it could be. Not only is that really slight, but also, he could have just gone there and put his cane there ahead of time. This is a for sale house that they just ran into. Why couldn't he just run into it? Whereas, in the 94 version, not only do they get a house, but the mother ends up marrying her boyfriend, seemingly accepting his proposal the night of Christmas, and she comments like, oh, a baby brother, and they sort of look at her stomach. So, like, did they have sex that night? Is that the implication, that literally this old Santa man made all these things happen? And he knows the DA's house. Which could just be crazed stalker, but could also be it seems to take more of a firmer stance on this man is probably the real Santa. I don't know what it's getting at.
Yeah, it is weird. It feels like it's trying to kind of like back end its whole like Christmas miracle shit, which like I do also find hilarious. Like the whole thing of like they had to add the thing of like the baby brother, because it's just like, yeah, no, you couldn't have done that in the original one, because that's just the tacit admission that, oh yeah, sex, that you wouldn't have been able to do in most 47 movies. And so it does feel a little jarring once you get to the end there. I do see that. But it also feels like it also front ends it with the 47 version, where it's like by the end you're like, maybe he wasn't after all. And again, it just feels like that wasn't the message in the end. It was this idea of like, have faith in these things, like despite their doubt, they still make your life better. And like the fact of like maybe that last little nod is meant to just kind of be like that continuation of that feeling of like, hey, we could have faith in this. But the 94 one just kind of goes, oh yeah, it has been legally decided now. So
yes.
Congratulations, I made your mom get fucked.
Yes.
It's like, yeah, it's just like the more you think about it, the worse it gets.
To be honest, that shot was kind of strange too. It wasn't as weird as like the remake of 101 Dalmatians, where the nanny's like, oh, you're pregnant, you have a glow about you, where you're like, what the fuck, you're fired. It's not as like,
get the fuck out of my house.
It's not that strange, but it is still a weird. I don't know. That's the thing that stuck with me.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a little odd. It is like, I didn't expect there to be as much discourse between the messages of these movies as there ends up being. But the more you think about it, the more it's just like, yeah, this is just kind of odd in its own way. And like, I hate how 90s the 94 version is. Like, it's so annoyingly 90s. Like, we've seen ones like that before, and we've dealt with them before. But the fact that this one just has like no shame in the kind of just like hokey shit it's doing, like early on when we have like the scene with the intoxicated, Santa. In the original one, it's just like, it's a pretty general thing of like, oh, this guy's intoxicated, get the fuck out of here, and that's the end of it. It's like, okay, cool. But of course, in 90s fashion, they can't just let shit go. It has to be a whole thing of, oh, he gets onto the sleigh, oh, his pants fall down, oh, he gets on, he falls off the sled falls down, he falls off, he has all his like wig and beard come off, and he's just this like fat New Yorker dude who's just like bumbling around. And then we get to the point of like, oh, could you be Santa? This takes up like an extra 10 fucking minutes at the end of the day. Well, maybe not that long, but still, it takes up enough time that feels like it.
I guess,
and it's just like, why?
I guess, of course, they give him more time. I guess they give him slightly more screen time because he's like a cartoonish villain in this one, but it's still overly 90s.
And like, of course, it's like filled with all these like really close-up shots on his face as he's falling and screaming, all these things. And then later in that scene at the end of the fucking parade, the one guy who calls up his boss or whatever who's just sitting in this literal dark fucking office like a James Bond villain. And it's like, what the fuck is happening? Like, where the fuck is any of this coming from? The original one was just talking about a dude working for Macy's. Like, it's just, I don't get why it felt like it had to do these things. Like, this movie is a full, like, near half an hour longer than the original, and it added nothing. It added nothing of extra value that I could really place. like all the moments of any kind of genuine human connection, it seems like they've kind of whittled out for more like 90isms. It's just like I don't get it. I don't know why they felt the need to do this.
Yeah, and to your point on that too, I included that in the opener because that was my primary takeaway, I guess, was that this 94 remake is just it's like Richie Rich starring Macaulay Culkin or North, the Rob Reiner movie. It is just pure 90s family comedy, and the soundtrack was driving me up a fucking wall because obviously both of these movies use Christmas songs to their benefit. In the 47 version, it's older, they're more traditional, and in the remake, they're still the traditional Christmas songs, but like Aretha Franklin is singing one, and Sarah McLachlan is singing one of the songs, so they're a bit more updated. But the incidental music is disgusting. Like,
Yeah.
I hate
God.
it.
It's like getting trapped inside a hell for clowns,
Yes.
It's just like, and I know ultimately this is just going to be me continuing to gripe about just the style of 90s film craft in general, which I know good movies came out of the 90s, I know ultimately, but just like a lot of those like very hashed out things where it feels like they just all of a sudden they've been given like better camera technology so they can do things like these close-ups and things, and it's just like it just adds nothing to the situation. It's like I can't even imagine at the time if this was considered more beneficial. Like I know in retrospect, obviously it's going to look even worse, but I can't imagine how this was considered like a good move in at the time as well. I just like I don't like it. I don't even have a deeper thought about it. It's just stupid.
Yeah, and I want to touch on the villain aspect of this too, because in the original, It is this psychiatrist, and the problem is more so based on personal hangups. Like this psychiatrist, Sawyer, clearly does not have a good home life. He like hates his wife and is constantly stressed out at work, and he takes it out on other people. So it's like an internalized problem that Chris has to deal with, and then they come to blows. And it's not even it's not about Chris, it's about someone else. He's standing up for Alvin. I believe his name was the janitor who likes to dress up as Santa for the Y. He's standing up for someone else against this tyrant figure, and that sort of kicks off the whole court stuff. In the is this man Santa? Is he crazed or whatever? In the 94 one, it is like an evil cabal of people working for this Shoppers Express guy that, like you said, is hidden in a dark James Bond villain style room, teaming up with this drunken Santa that displayed his ass to a bunch of kids at the parade because he was drunk. And it kind of takes away from it, not because of how cartoonishly supervillain-esque it is. I mean, well, not just because of that, but the altercation happens because this drunken Santa is talking about Chris and like calling him a pedophile, and I'm like, what the fuck is this movie doing? And so it makes all the issues about him, which I guess adds to the self-delusion thing. Like, I said this man wasn't Santa, or I challenged his belief structure. That was the lie that Sawyer told in the original movie. But they don't really go that far with the 94 one, at least not that I can remember. It's just, hey, you're the Macy's, or you're the Kohl's department Santa. You just tried to kill this guy for no reason. They're not thinking about what they're filming before they film it. they just made things happen.
I think you just summed up the 90s in general with that sentence right there. Like, my God. It definitely felt like a decade of, we can do this, and we're not even going to begin to think about a longer term implication with this. It just feels like so many movies kind of slot into that whole, like, that little place of, this is a thing that'll sell us some tickets at the time, and that's really all that seems to matter. And which is ironic considering the message of the movie. But it's and obviously that hasn't gone away. Like we definitely get more examples of those as we go further into the world, just because, like, hey, with the technology's better, we can just make more movies, so we're just gonna have more examples of that in general. But just it feels like the 90s especially just seem to kind of get into that rut of, this is stuff we can do anyway, next thing. And it's just kind of sad, like, it doesn't feel good shitting on this movie. It feels like it's earned it, but it hasn't earned it this much, because it implies that it put effort towards it.
Right.
It's like, I don't know. It's just, and like, I'm trying to just extend thoughts about this in general, because, like, but at the same time, like, how else am I supposed to say it? Of like, the 47 one was pretty good. I won't lie. I honestly was still kind of bored with it, but it wasn't terrible. But God, the 90s one was just kind of like nothing to me, man. Like, it's just like, I'm forgetting chunks of it as we're going into this review.
I will say, it's funny because I hadn't I hadn't seen either of these before, and Miracle on 34th Street is like one of the definitive holiday classics that is always played. You know, this,
No.
It's a Wonderful Life, and Merry Christmas, Charlie Brown, or whatever the fuck that thing's called, are like the three things that get played every Christmas. And somehow I have never seen it. I was aware of its plot. I even knew about the court thing going in because the letters being delivered to the courtroom has been such a thing that's been parodied so much. It's one of those instances where, like, I haven't seen the movie, but I've seen the movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I will say, I think I was more enthralled than you were with the 47 one, and most of that had to do with Edmund Gwenn's performance. I just thought it was this...
Yeah.
I thought it was really... He kept me hooked. I guess I was a little bored when he wasn't on screen, when it was just Maureen O'Hara, like, walking around her New York apartment talking to what's his fucking name, who didn't do much for me. I guess I was a little bored, but overall, I was definitely invested in the movie.
Yeah. I think just at a certain point, I'm just not huge on that style of movie in general. Just like, I know ultimately, like, I'm sure that just makes me sound jaded, but I think it's just like, I don't know, just like they've never really grabbed me too well. I will say I do agree with you. The performance of Gwen was pretty much what kept me, and I think it's just because I just kind of get tired of the same. And I've talked about it lots of times before. A lot of folks in the 40s and 50s, a lot of the character types are exactly the goddamn same. Like, I know that can be said about literally any decade, but especially in the 40s and 50s, it's just like the same kind of straight talking guy character to like the sort of unflappable female character kind of like archetypes and everything. Like, and the fact that like Edwin Gwynn just kind of being here and actually like having character and pizzazz and like on-screen likability, just elevated it that much more, just to like, okay, yeah, I'm at least gonna watch this through. But otherwise, it just gets so samey after you've seen enough of them. And I know ultimately that's on my end more than anything, and I'm sure this is still worthy of being considered a classic, but it's just like, I think also just the fact that it ends in a fucking courtroom drama. Like, I don't know if there are very few movies other than actual courtroom dramas from the start that are ever improved by turning it into legal action. Like, between Devil and Daniel Webster and, I don't know, fucking Patch Adams, it's just like, why are we here?
Why are we doing court things? It's funny because I brought up North earlier, which sort of starts in a courtroom and in many ways ends in a courtroom too. And I'm like, why is this here? I don't hate North as much as someone like Roger Ebert does, who famously said, I hate this movie. But I mean, I don't disagree with you. I think a courtroom is an easy place to go to try and get comedy out of something and to try to get suspense out of something, or tension. Like, it's sort of one of those staple settings that you can milk a lot of stuff out of, even if your movie isn't explicitly based around it. So I do tend to think that people over rely on that.
Yeah,
I agree.
it's just, yeah.
And
ultimately, and also I know Patch Adams was based on a true story, but also I just hate that movie, so whatever.
It's not great.
It's pretty bad.
Not to prolong the conversation, the only other thing I really want to talk about, and I don't want to harp on it because we've done nothing but harp on 94, but it still has to be said. It's strange that in the 47 version, Susan, who's played by Natalie Wood, I actually thought was a fairly decent child actor. She wasn't like amazing or anything. She's just a kid actor, but her lines still felt genuine. They didn't necessarily feel stilted. I don't want to hate on Mara Wilson because it's been done to death, but I've never really cared for her as a child actor. I don't know why she was like the thing in the 90s between this and Mrs. Doubtfire and Matilda. Like, I never really got it, I guess.
Yeah.
It feels really... It almost feels like factory made, her performance, which is very depressing.
Yeah, that's... Yeah. I think it's... I've always been kind of iffy on child actors in general, so it's difficult to really... It's difficult to really have a hard opinion on it, but yeah, it's just kind of dull. And that's like... And of course, it's still comparing it to the original, like to the 47 one, where the kid was essentially just another, just like full-grown woman character, but just also now small
Yes.
in a lot of the ways. And so it was kind of, which I should say, like getting out in front of that, I mean, in her performance, I don't want to give any kind of weird implication with that sentence.
No, I understood you, but yes.
Yeah, I realized it as it left my mouth of like, that sounds weird. So, but like my point just being like, she was still kind of dry, still just kind of straightforward, but she didn't do anything wrong explicitly. But the kind of weird, just like, it seems like Mara Wilson in so many of her movies is just like constantly just like a little haunted, you know? Like it just seems like
she's possessed.
It's like not even possessed, just like she's clearly gone through something. And even when she's kind of on the upturn, it's like that kind of softened happiness of someone who's gone through way more shit than they needed to at that point. And so it's just always kind of weird just seeing that of like, yeah, it's not even like it's always just kind of feeling of like, you doing okay? Like, you don't have to be doing this. It's like, I don't know. It's hard to put it into words explicitly beyond that, I guess.
Well, now I guess I'm worried because I don't know what Mara Wilson's upbringing was like. I hope it wasn't like that bad.
I mean, I know, like, not to do too bad of a tangent, but when she was doing Matilda, it was really sad because like her mom was dying of cancer, and
Ooh.
but ultimately, like, she was able to, and she ultimately died before the film was fully released. But Dan DeVito actually got her a pre-release copy of the film so that they could watch it together.
That's nice.
Like, for that purpose, obviously, like, yeah, it's clear that she's sad, and that makes sense. But like, that's the most I can think of. I don't know if she's had explicitly bad home life other than that, but that's kind of the big one. That's at least the famous one at this point. And also just, continuing to illuminate the fact that Dan DeVito's a fucking angel of a human being.
Yes. And I'd also like to say that, again, I didn't want to harp on her either. It's just like a child actor thing, and I've never really been a fan of that 90s stuff with her, so I don't know why she took off. But she's done stuff recently, like web stuff, and she's like fine. So
Oh yeah,
I should say
actress.
fine in terms of actress. I'm not like, oh, she's fine. Now we're both like stepping into keep.
Oh, we're both like,
no, that's not what I meant.
what is this movie? What has this movie done to us? Here we are. We're doing the things that they did in the 90s. That is, say something that seems weird, but at least we're having the decency to follow up on it.
Yeah.
Oh my god. I don't know. I feel like we're just waffling at this point, and I feel bad that this is just another shorter kind of like conclusion to come to, but it's hard to consider the 94 one the better of the two. I still personally don't necessarily love the original. I don't think I'll watch it again. But I can recognize why it's considered a classic at the very least. At least it's got some level of, showmanship and actual messages on display versus just whatever exactly the 90s one's trying to do, other than just go, hey, remember this one?
Yeah.
So,
No, I mean,
it was an admirable effort, I guess.
I agree with you. I'm definitely a fan of the 47 version. I don't think I would ever watch it again, like by myself, but as like a holiday thing, if it was on, say at my grandmother's, who always has the TV running during the holidays when we're visiting, but it's usually on like some reality nonsense. If this was ever on, I would gladly sit down and watch it with family. It's got that warm, schmaltzy sort of feeling, but it doesn't feel overly produced or anything like that. And I should say too that the 47 version, again, not to waffle, it has like pretty strong messages against pure consumerism, which is strange because like I went into the movie thinking it was purely a commercial for Macy's, and in some ways it was,
yeah.
but they introduced Gimbals, who isn't like a cartoonish supervillain company. They're also like, I mean, it's a marketing strategy, obviously, but they're like, you know what, if Macy's is doing that, we're going to do it too. Send people where they need to get it brings them together in a weird way, so you can still consider it like a commercial for Macy's, but to that end, it's a pretty successful one. So
yeah, it shows them as human, which is interesting.
Yeah,
which like you don't see too often, especially nowadays. Because like, God forbid, even slight lack of praise be thrown towards something.
Right.
It's like, we are in the age of like, not necessarily in the age of no nuance anymore. Like, obviously, there's greater and greater feelings of kind of pushing back against more reactionary feelings, but we are definitely in an era where you can bring your opinion up anywhere, and someone else is going to take the lowest possible take from it. So it makes sense.
Yeah, but no, 47 one's great. 94 one, I couldn't stand. I like Richard Attenborough just fine. It's just I don't think the movie works, and I think that they changed a bit too much to the point where the story doesn't feel cohesive or having like an actual strong message. But hey, what do I know? Siskel and Ebert both said it was great. So
I mean, who gives a fuck?
I do. They are my pantheon of.
Fair enough. Whatever's your deal.
Their word is gospel to me.
Only reviewer I listen to is Yossi Croshaw. Damn it. He's not even with movies.
I'm a Gene Shalit guy.
No, where are we on this? Jesus Christ.
I don't actually believe that. I disagree with them on a lot of stuff. I just read that and I thought it was just bizarre. But oh well.
I think we've waffled as much as I can.
Yep, I'll go ahead and take us into socials. So, feel free to like and follow us on any of your favorite podcasting platforms. We're on things like Apple Play, or Apple Podcasts it is called, Google Play, Spreaker, Podbay, Podomatic, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, all these things. YouTube we're on, but we're hosted on Anchor. Thank you, Anchor.
Thank you, Anchor.
There we go. And you can send an email, theyremadeit@gmail.com, suggestions for future episodes you might want us to do, thoughts on the podcast, positive and or negative, or if you just want to say hi. And go ahead and follow us at It Remade on Twitter. When we post when episodes are going live, we post full circle diagrams that I put together of people we've covered on the show more than once, and posters, promo art for things that we're discussing in potential future episodes. So go ahead and follow us there on Twitter. I know. There's a lot going on with Twitter right now, but I'm gonna post this stuff somewhere.
We haven't touched on that one.
I ain't going to Facebook. So.
Jesus Christ, let's not even get into that one.
That is it for follow us at It Remade on Twitter for now, and that is it for socials.
Yes. We'll figure some out later. We'll see if Tumblr makes a fucking comeback. Which, if it does, I don't know if I want to be there either. I think we might be the least welcome people on that site when it comes to reactionary things.
Probably, I think I've probably said a lot of not even offensive stuff, but just a lot of things that people would be very angry about. So
yeah, I've been on there for a number of years, just kind of passively and. Yeah, no, I think it's better just to go down with the ship than go back there. Jesus Christ.
It's like, oh, well, I guess Twitter's gone now. We just won't promote anything.
Yeah, we're just here. Sure. If you know about us, tell other people, whatever. It's fine. As the olden times.
Yes.
God. I don't like this modern era lately, but you know what? I'm sticking with it. Because what the fuck else am I going to do?
Yeah, go back in time. There's not much we can do.
Yeah, no. I'm good. I got my air conditioning, knock on wood. That's all I need. I say as if it's not freezing.
I was going to say, have you switched to your furnace?
No, I'm on my furnace now. It's
okay,
like, I'm just
okay.
Look, whatever. I'm waffling even harder now. As always, I'm your host, Stuart.
I'm your host, Jacob.
Good night. God bless. Whatever the fuck you want to do.
Bye.
You see, Mrs. Walker, this is quite an opportunity for me. For the past 50 years or so, I've been getting more and more worried about Christmas. Seems we're all so busy trying to beat the other fellow in making things go faster and look shinier and cost less that Christmas and I are sort of getting lost in the shuffle.
Oh, I don't think so. Christmas is still Christmas.
Oh, Christmas isn't just a day. It's a frame of mind. And that's what's been changing. That's why I'm glad I'm here. Maybe I can do something about it.